Support for the Legislative Gazette comes from New York State United Teachers, working to support students, educators, and public schools as the center of their communities through the Public Schools Unite Us initiative, and United University Professions, representing 37,000 academic and professional employees at SUNY campuses and teaching hospitals across New York State. Frederick E. Cole, President, uupinfo.org. President Donald Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, lambasted state Democrats' immigration policies during a stop in Albany this week and threw his support behind a bill that would erode New York's sanctuary city policies. Jung-Yoon Han from the New York Public News Network with more.
Homan took special aim at New York's green light law, which lets undocumented immigrants obtain driver's licenses. The law also blocks the Department of Homeland Security from accessing state DMV records. He says the law is one way that cities in New York have been able to enforce sanctuary policies, which he says are dangerous.
No one should be pushing back on removing public safety threats from their communities.
That's why he's supporting state Republicans' efforts to pass Lakin's Law, which would require local officials to notify federal agents when someone who's undocumented gets arrested. At the same press conference, Homan couldn't answer what Columbia University graduate student and pro-Palestinian activist Mahmoud Khalil was arrested for when asked by the New York Public News Network.
I'm familiar with this exact charge. I can just tell you what my discussions have been with it. Is that it's a direct violation of our foreign policy objectives.
Trump officials have not shown evidence to corroborate this claim. In Albany, I'm Jung-Yoon Han for the New York Public News Network.
A new Siena College poll looking ahead to 2026 finds many voters in New York haven't heard of the potential candidates yet. Legislative Gazette's Dave Lucas with more.
If the 2026 Democratic primary were held today, Governor Kathy Hochul would win hands down. The Siena poll out Monday shows Hochul supported by 46% of Democrats to Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado's 11%. 10% say they would vote for Congressman Richie Torres, while 28% say they don't know who they would support. Steve Greenberg is with the Siena College Research Institute.
If we look at it regionally, interesting. Among New York City Democrats, Hochul leads 44% there, 9% for Delgado, 11% for Torres. In the downstate suburbs, Hochul has a commanding lead, 56%, 12% for Torres, 7% for Delgado. But among upstate voters, Hochul 43%, Delgado 20%, Torres 6%.
Still, Greenberg says only 40% of New Yorkers view Governor Kathy Hochul favorably, while a majority of 50% view her unfavorably.
And when we look at the generic reelect, that is, if the election were to, today, would you vote to reelect Hochul as governor, or would you prefer, quote, someone else, unquote? Only 34% of voters say they're prepared to reelect Hochul. 56% say they would prefer someone else. If we look at just Democrats on that question, a bare majority, 51%, say they would be prepared to reelect Hochul, but a significant minority, 40% of Democrats, say they would prefer someone else.
Could Delgado become that someone else? The former Hudson Valley congressman, who became Hochul's second lieutenant governor in 2022, has been distancing himself from her. In February, he announced that he will not run for re-election in 2026 and would not rule out a run for governor. He issued a statement that says, in part, all options are on the table. Hochul's office responded by saying Delgado would have been replaced on the ticket anyway and accused him of not wanting to do the job. Speaking on WCNY's Capitol Press Room, Delgado said his party has helped to perpetuate economic inequality that he says favors big corporations with investments that don't have a return for taxpayers.
And even when we start trying to invest across the board in public goods, what happens is the folks who are at the super top, the super rich, the super wealthy, the billionaires, they get the benefit of that. So even though you might be leveling up the bottom, the top is also leveling up. So the economic gap remains. And what else remains? Affordability issues remain. That's the piece we keep missing as Democrats in particular. We marry ourselves to these market-oriented ideas that are wholly profit-driven under the hope that it'll somehow make its way to the public. And we see time and time again, it just reinforces economic inequality. There's a reason why we are where we are right now. There's a reason why we have an administration in the White House that we have right now. And this is part of it.
Greenberg says most New Yorkers really don't know Delgado or Torres.
Delgado, 19% of voters view him favorably, 16% unfavorably, but 65% either never heard of him and don't know enough about him to have an opinion. Comparably, Torres is at 18-15 with 67% having never heard of him or don't know enough about him to have an opinion. They're both a little bit more known with Democrats, but not much. Among Democrats alone, Delgado is a 26-10 compared to Torres's 27 to 14%.
Greenberg notes the slate of candidates is likely to change by the time the 2026 primary rolls around. On the Republican side, asked about a potential primary for governor, voters gave Hudson Valley Congressman Mike Lawler an early edge over Nassau County Executive Bruce Blakeman, but they are also largely unknown. The poll has a margin of error of about 4 points.
For the Legislative Gazette, I'm Dave Lucas.
You are listening to the Legislative Gazette, a program about New York State government and politics. I'm David Gastina. This week I sat down with Dale Brick, a lawyer based at the Environmental and Energy Law program at Harvard Law School. Dale was previously the Deputy Secretary for Energy and Environment for the state of New York, and we talked about the impact of the EPA freezing climate funds from Climate United, the subsequent lawsuit, and the impact on environmental funding flowing into New York.
This is part of the Inflation Reduction Act. There was a provision within that act called the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. It's a $27 billion program, and it was developed by EPA. So Congress designated EPA to design a program to help finance clean energy technologies across the economy, across the country. And so EPA developed this program. They put out an RFP. Many people applied to be the implementers of this program. And we can go through the details because the program has 3 different parts to it. And there are many grantees. And actually, the 3 largest are all suing EPA now because of the frozen funds at Citibank. And what EPA did, which is a very normal process for the Treasury Department, but not something that EPA has done before because they're not usually tasked with something of this scale in terms of distributing dollars. Citibank is acting as a fiscal agent. So they don't really have a discretionary role here, but they are holding on to the dollars. And when Administrator Zeldin decided that he didn't like this program and wanted to get a hold of this $27 billion fund, the FBI sent a letter to Citibank directing them to freeze the funds. And so, which has just been disclosed in the court proceeding. There was actually a hearing on this yesterday.
And am I right, Dale, excuse me, that had to do with checking the applications or the grant applications for DEI?
Well, it doesn't surprise me that that's what's happening because that is happening across the board with all of the funds. And, doing things like eliminating adders, if you're serving a disadvantaged community. And there certainly is a requirement across the board for 40% of dollars to benefit disadvantaged communities. That was the Justice 40 initiative that was part of the Biden administration. But these things are embedded in contracts. People have signed contracts. And so a larger question here is, is this a country that operates under the rule of law and a signed contract is valid, or the administrator can just do whatever they want regardless of what is stated in a contract. So that's part of what's at issue here. And of course, what's at issue are, all of the benefits that these dollars were designed to deliver to Americans, including New Yorkers. So we can jump into the details of what is a green bank, what is this money intended to do, and how is this program all designed in the first place. So the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund has three parts. One is the National Clean Investment Fund. That's where Climate United and two other of the larger players, Coalition for Green Capital and Power Forward, those are the three winners of that large amount of money. So that's where the opportunity to make very large loans to support clean energy investments. And you can see some of the investments that these organizations have already made. There was a very large solar project with the University of Arkansas that Climate United did. They've put out a $250 million facility to provide low interest loans for electrifying truck fleets and getting all of that dirty diesel pollution out of our neighborhoods. There's also community funds for small community projects. Both Coalition for Green Capital and Climate United have. And you can imagine the kinds of projects that communities want to have, like solar plus storage and community facilities. So when there are these giant storms and the power is out, people have a place to go for whether it's cooling or heating, depending on what kind of storm you're having, and just basic necessities. So that's the largest $14 billion fund. Then there's the Community Clean Energy Accelerator, which is a $6 billion fund. And that money is flowing through 6 different organizations, which are essentially associations of community banks. And I think of that program as sort of 1,000 flowers. That money is going to flow to many, many community banks, credit unions. They can each get a $10 million grant. And that's to help really every bank become a green bank so that everybody's community bank knows what they're talking about and is able to help their customers invest in, like when you're doing a home improvement loan, you might want to have super energy efficient windows and heating systems or clean electric heat pumps. And this technologies will not be foreign to your bank. They'll be able to provide you a loan at the best rate with those dollars. And then the last piece of this program, which is not really at issue in this controversy that we're discussing, is the Solar for All program, but it is part of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And that's a $7 billion program that went to 60 grantees, many of them states and cities. New York is a beneficiary of that grant, where NYSERDA is getting the funds. And that's to support residential solar in disadvantaged communities. So those are the 3 tranches of funding. And we can get into more details about how that money would come to New York and benefit New Yorkers.
Yeah, we should disclose that Dale Brick was appointed as a board member of NYSERDA by Governor Hochul back in 24 in June. The issue of New York's funding through the Green Bank, is that threatened now, or are we protected in New York?
Well, and I'll just say I'm speaking in my personal capacity in my position at Harvard and not in my capacity as a board member, but all of the ultimate beneficiaries of these funds are vulnerable, because if the funds are never released from Citibank, they will never flow to our state and local green banks or to anyone else, and we'll never get all of these benefits. So yes, we're all at risk. I mean, New York has 2 green banks. We have the New York Green Bank, which is the state level bank, and we have NYSEC, the New York City Energy Efficiency Corporation, which is our New York City Green Bank. And they're both, going concerns, doing lots of great work, and they'll keep going regardless. But they might not get the boost of resources that would enable us to get more.
That's Dale Brick, a lawyer based at the Environmental and Energy Law program at Harvard Law School. Dale was previously the Deputy Secretary for Energy and Environment in New York. You are listening to the Legislative Gazette, a program about New York State government and politics. I'm David Gistina. The Department of Government Efficiency has taken a sledgehammer to the federal government's operations in an effort to cut spending under the orders of billionaire Elon Musk. That effort has led to the firing of thousands of federal employees with little or no warning, including nearly 6,000 employees of the United States Department of Agriculture. The Legislative Gazette's Aaron Shella-Levine spoke with 3 USDA employees caught up in the turmoil.
Elise Soto, Jackie Adler, and Kate Westcott were all fired on February 14th.
Yep, Valentine's Day massacre. They let go like 4,000 people within 20 hours.
Each received nearly identical termination letters that read, in part, quote, "The agency finds, based on your performance, that you have not demonstrated that your further employment at the agency would be in the public interest," end quote. Westcott and Soto had joined the food distribution branch of the Northeast Regional Office's Food Nutrition Services in December, working remotely. Westcott says it came out of nowhere.
The email was very rude and, said, based on your performance, you're not good for the American people. Your job shouldn't be continued, which I thought was crazy because I had only worked there for a couple months and I hadn't had a performance review yet. So, and my boss, congratulated both Elise and I on our progress, felt like we were progressing through our training very well.
Their branch had 3 employees cut out of 7. They coordinate federal grants and help 7 states, including New York, Vermont, Massachusetts, and Connecticut, and the Virgin Islands, distribute food.
The food will not get to the people who need it. Because that's the biggest issue that I think is going to happen. Elise and I dealt with distributing local domestic food product to these programs. And so anytime there was a delivery issue or even just ordering the food to get to the schools and the elderly assistance program and to the food banks, like we were handling those deliveries and distributions. And so I'm worried that the food is not going to get to where it needs to go and that people are going to go hungry.
Soto says a job at USDA was something she spent years building up to. The whirlwind of losing it has been a shock to the system, putting her and her child at risk of needing the programs she was helping to coordinate.
So mid-December we got hired, and then mid-February we were fired. Before that, I worked for New York State Office of General Services. I administered the Emergency Food Assistance Program there for New York State for 2 years. And it's very near and dear to my heart. The mission is to support the Emergency Food Network. And before that, I have a background in being a child from food insecurity. So it kind of just brought me full circle. I was able to get out of a tight spot when I was younger, and I moved up, went to college. I went to culinary school, actually. So food has very much been a part of my life. And from the state to the federal government, and now back again to food assistance, needing food assistance.
As federal employees share their stories, many are doing so anonymously. But Soto says it's important to put names and faces to the statistics.
I think it's to show the other person that you can speak up, your voice matters, your story matters, and it just brings humanity to it. I'm a single mother, and this has caused a detriment to my household. But not only that, I want other people to know that you can be brave enough and speak up and use your voice because you matter, right? We're all American citizens here. We matter. Our voice matters. And with the support of the unions, I think sharing our names and sharing our stories also shows them that we're all in this together.
Westcott says one of the most disheartening parts of the past month has been seeing an increase in rhetoric online that paints federal employees as lazy or just looking for a paycheck. They believe in the missions of their branches and want to make sure the most vulnerable citizens in their region can survive.
My manager was working, honestly, like 15 hours a day, not getting reimbursed for it, not getting paid for it, but because she cared about the program and wanted people to be able to be fed. And even when we got terminated at 9 o'clock in the morning, I stayed until 5:30. Like, I wanted to make sure that everything was still good to go until the last possible second that I could, until I got kicked off my computer. Like, I could be making more money somewhere else. That's not why I'm doing it. I want to help people.
Adler had been at the Food and Nutrition Services branch working on community nutrition programs for 7 weeks before she was laid off. She says it's not like there was a lot of bloat to begin with in the regional office.
See, Nero itself, the Northeast Regional Office, should be staffed at 120. We were staffed before we were fired at 100. Mm-hmm. Now they are staffed at 84 out of 120. So please explain to me how that's efficient when people are not going to be able to get the work done that needs to get done in the time that it needs to be done so that people can get the services they need on the other side.
Mm-hmm. Prior to her brief stint with USDA, Adler had worked in public schools for a decade. She was driven to join the USDA after seeing the importance of free, quality meals at schools.
I never had a backup plan because, as we've all said, like, this is the culmination. Like, you get to this place and you're like, cool, I've worked my butt off, I've done all these things, this is where I retire from. And that always was the concept.
Adler was assigned to coordinate a novel summer EBT program for families who rely on school lunches to feed their kids year-round. A program she says will now go understaffed, possibly resulting in children going unnecessarily hungry. She adds there's irony in DOJ's goal of increasing efficiency by cutting skilled workers with years of program experience.
We're, not to be funny, like the best of the best. I mean, we're people who know these programs. I've worked in schools. You guys have done the jobs you've done. I mean, you know your programs. And we take that knowledge and expertise so that we can help state agencies. And the irony of government efficiency is if they want efficiency, we're the people, because we know how to look at state agencies and other programs and say, hey, you're not doing this right. You need to spend your money this way. Without us and without people at the top like that, there's no guidance for state agencies and other people.
All 3 women are probationary employees and had no plan B. They expected to stay longer than 2 months after working so long to join the USDA. As reported by NPR, USDA is set to temporarily reinstate most of the employees fired thus far for 45 days, while an investigation into their terminations continue. Soto says she'd return if given the chance, even if only temporarily.
Yes, because of the mission. It's very important to me, and I said I would absolutely go back. Do I trust my job to be secure, even though I'm supposed to be a union contracted employee? No, not at all.
I think we all need backup plans.
Yeah, I think it's time to look at backup plans because you can't trust the government.
Soto says as of Wednesday they have not heard from USDA about being reinstated. For the Legislative Gazette, I'm Aaron Shello-Levine.
You are listening to the Legislative Gazette, a program about New York State government and politics. I'm David Gastina. Amid concerns it could close for good, the General Services Administration says the Poughkeepsie Social Security Office will fully reopen in 6 months. But employees aren't letting their guard down, as the Legislative Gazette's Jesse King reports.
The Social Security Administration is reportedly closing its hearing office on South Broadway at the end of May, citing issues with the lease. There are currently no plans to replace it. The future of multiple Social Security offices in New York hangs in the balance as the Trump administration works to slash spending across federal agencies. SSA locations in White Plains, Poughkeepsie, and Horseheads recently turned up on a list of lease cancellations by the Department of Government Efficiency. The closure of offices isn't new. Locations in Kingston and Newburgh have shuttered in recent years, and a West Nyack office that closed for renovations last summer is still only available by phone, according to the SSA website. At a press conference Monday, Westchester County Executive Ken Jenkins proposed moving the White Plains office to a county-owned space. While a specific location hasn't been worked out, Jenkins says he has a few ideas.
We have some options that includes the county center, where we have some tremendous space that was being utilized previously by Westchester Community College for doing things. So we're going to be able to see what things could work for our federal partners.
County officials say the White Plains hearing office is crucial because it handles benefit cases across the Hudson Valley. In a letter to acting SSA Commissioner Lee Dudek last week, New York Attorney General Letitia James said the office has a backlog of roughly 2,000 cases, and that, quote, eliminating the office would exacerbate the problem and harm even more vulnerable New Yorkers, end quote. Sam Ramrup, president of the Association of Administrative Law Judges, says it's not fair to ask seniors and people with disabilities to travel long distance just to fight for their benefits in court.
Imagine if you live in Poughkeepsie, imagine if you live in Monticello, and you now have to go to the Bronx, or you now have to go to Lower Manhattan. We're talking about people with significant impairments. Asking them to do that is just a burden on them and is just not right.
Congressman George Latimer is a Democrat from the 16th District who was Jenkins' predecessor as Westchester County Executive. He says the next closest hearing offices for Westchester County residents are in the Bronx, Newark, New Jersey, New Haven, Connecticut, and Albany, New York.
And when you consider that 10,000 people every day, that's my baby boomer generation, 10,000 people every day are becoming eligible for Social Security, and now in the program, that administrative responsibility is growing, not shrinking.
In a statement to WAMC Friday about closures nationwide, an SSA spokesperson said in part, quote, "We are working with the General Services Administration to review our leases and ensure they are used efficiently. Most of the leases we are not renewing are for small remote hearing sites that are co-located with other federal space. As the majority of our hearings are held virtually, we no longer need as many in-person hearing locations," end quote. It's not exactly clear what the closures mean for staff at these locations. The SSA told employees Friday that it plans to cut roughly 7,000 employees nationwide. If the federal government takes Westchester County's offer, Latimer says it could potentially save the government money and allow White Plains staff to continue working close to home.
This is a positive way to respond to something that has happened in the administration. There are other issues that are out there. There are issues that put us at odds and make it a very contentious environment. But we've always tried, those of us who've been in public office a long time, to have a positive response. This is a positive response, and we hope that the president takes us up on the offer and saves the Social Security office's presence in White Plains.
For the Legislative Gazette, I'm Jesse King.
And that about does it for this week's show. The Legislative Gazette is a production of WAMC Northeast Public Radio. We had help from the New York Public News Network. You can listen anytime at WAMCpodcast.org or anywhere you get your podcasts. Look for program number 2511. And join us again next week at this same time for more news on New York State government and politics. For the Legislative Gazette, I'm David Castina. Support for the Legislative Gazette comes from United University Professions, representing 37,000 academic and professional employees at SUNY campuses and teaching hospitals across New York State. Frederick E. Cole, President. UUPinfo.org.